Good morning. Can I just have the lights turned down a bit? I'd like to show you mostly some photos of some of the sites from East Kalimantan, and the photos need some... Keep going. Okay. So the project I've been working on for the last few months is breeder cattle exported to East Kalimantan and distributed to local farmers. And I have made various predictions in the past on the price of animals and the prediction that I very comfortably make now is that whilst up until the last few years the feeders and slaughter animals have been the big game, but the new big deal for the future is breeders, and the new market for the industry in the north will be breeders. And the price for breeders will be so much more attractive. It's a whole new market, and hopefully, from what I can show you here, it'll become obvious that this market is very real, and it's going to be a huge boost for the industry, especially in Northern Australia. So this there's a recent shipment has been sent to Kalimantan. So Kalimantan is the Indonesian part of the island of Borneo, and that word there of Kalimantan is pretty much along the equator. So Kalimantan is like the Northern Territory or the Pilbara of Indonesia. It's their primary province for the production of massive bulk commodities, so coal, gold, copper, palm oil, oil and gas, and the town of Balikpapan is about there, and it is effectively the sort of port headland of eastern Indonesia, and that's the site for where these cattle have gone in. There's also, palm oil is the other major commodity for this whole area, and palm oil grows about up to 5 degrees either side of the equator. So up here into Malaysia and southern Thailand, and down right through Sumatra, and even across into Papua New Guinea, there's a great deal of palm oil in those areas. It's not working. Next one. So Indonesia's got about 10 million hectares of palm oil, and about 3 million, round numbers, as in Kalimantan. Next. And Malaysia, round figures, 5 million hectares. Just to put that in perspective for breeding cattle, optimum grazing densities is about a beast to the hectare. You don't get that on day one, but certainly after a while you can get a beast to the hectare and some pretty good performance. So the potential for numbers in there is great. You can't use all of the area, but certainly a lot of it. Next one. So this particular project, as developed by the Kalimantan government, East Kalimantan government, was primarily to increase their breeder numbers. But it was to encourage the development of cattle and palm integration, and initially to do that with smallholders, but to use that as a lead-in for commercial larger plantations to follow. Next one. So at the moment the Kalimantan has largely just barley cattle, bantang cattle, relatively small numbers, a few 100,000 perhaps, and they graze under these palm trees. Next one. Also, some of the smallholders. A lot of smallholders in Indonesia are grouped together in cooperatives, and about 20 to 30 farmers get together and they operate a small area of land, sort of 20 to 100 hectares. They get together and they do joint efforts. So some of them have small sheds like this that might have, say, 20 or 30 head in it, and these animals are just tied up and hand-fed daily. Next one. This is another everyone has, just like farmers here, everyone does things slightly differently. In this case, these animals are tied up over on an elevated platform, and the faeces go down here and onto the rice paddy. Next one. And then the majority of farmers with cattle in Indonesia, and certainly in Kalimantan, have 2 or 3 in the backyard, and they just simply cut the grass each day and feed them. And their main market is for Korban, which is the religious slaughter festival. On one day a year, Muslims have a charitable slaughter process. So people with cash buy an animal, a cow, a sheep or a goat. They donate it to the mosque, and the animals are slaughtered at the mosque, and then the poor people from wherever the mosque area, they can apply to the mosque and they get an allocation of a kilo of meat, whichever it is. So once a year people buy male animals and donate them to the mosque, and that's the biggest single beef sales day in Indonesia, and the prices for those animals are usually 10 to 20% higher than the normal going rate. Next one. So in Kalimantan, they have to import animals just to supply their own single day of slaughter. Forget about their beef supply. They don't have enough even for the one day of Korban. So this particular exercise, developed by the Kalimantan government, they got mostly some funds from the federal government, and they allocated about 50 head to around 200 farmer cooperatives. The process is that the farmer doesn't actually own the cow. The cow is the ownership of the cow is retained by the government. The farmer gets to keep the first 2 calves out of those cows, and then he hands the cow on, I guess, back to the government, who then gives it to another farmer, and the process goes on. So basically the farmer has to put in his resources to care for that animal and get the calves, and then once the calves are big enough to be weaned, he keeps them and on the cow goes. The idea is that certainly in the first instance these cows are hand-fed with just cut grass, cut and carry, which is their standard approach. But all of these farmers, certainly, yes, all of these farmers have palm oil as part of their businesses. So they might only individually own maybe 2 hectares, but within the group of 20-odd farmers, they manage one large area of palm, and they have the resources to either graze under that palm or harvest the leaves. Next one. The farmers here will tell you that this is the worst drought they've ever seen in memory. So this is before it rained. It's just the storms have just started in Kalimantan and Jakarta now, and this was the worst drought they'd ever seen in their lives. And so there is still plenty of grass there, don't worry. Next one. They also, it's not that clear, but this is king grass, Napier grass, and you just plant any. It's on the equator. It's normally between 2,000 and 3,000 millimetres of rainfall, pretty reliable except for this year, and heavy red soils mostly. So you can grow anything. So as long as there's a bit of rain about, they can grow plenty of grass. Next one. So as well as the grass that they purposely grow and plant, there under the palm, there is just native grasses grow willy-nilly, so there's plenty of opportunity to harvest grass there, either cut and carry or put the cattle on there for grazing. Next one. So it's my view that integration of cattle with palm oil is the world's most efficient beef production system by a country mile. Where else in the world can you operate a cattle station without actually buying the cattle station? So you own the land already, you're already operating a full and rather profitable business from that piece of land, and then you underneath your primary product, you operate an entirely new business. Now, the reason this really hasn't caught on until, well, and still hasn't caught on, but it will. So up until now, it's been cheaper to buy feeders from you and send them there and feed them in a feedlot than it has been to muck around with breeders under the tree. Now that feeders are $3 plus, and as somebody predicted will be $4 plus, then suddenly it's not a bad idea to grow your own at home. So they're all thinking about this, and they're watching this project and others to see where it's going to go and how to do it the best. So this is just the most magnificent beef production system in the world. Next one. So this smallholder system is obviously different than what a large corporation would run in a large plantation, but they're doing it on a modest scale, and we can certainly draw a lot of conclusions from how this is managed. So this is a little cooperative. This one, I think it's got 29, is it? 29 people, which is 29 families that are part of this cooperative. And it says they've got 20-something. So there's 50 or 60 hectares there. Some will be paddy, some will be palm plantation, some will be other areas for growing corn or whatever else they grow. And there's a whole mixture of stuff from vegetables, fruit, pretty wide range of stuff. Soybeans. Next one. So those farmers enter into a contract with the East Kalimantan government. And the government essentially says, if you build a yard for these cows, we'll give you the cows, you sign this contract, this is how it works, 2 calves, you give the cows back, and we'll also give you a few assets to go along with it. So they're all contracted, and at the meetings where they introduced all this to these people, they had the army and the police in the front row, and one of the things they told them is, if you do anything bad to these cows or steal them or pull a swifty and slaughter them, then you'll be answering to the army in the front row. So they got the message. So people they just go out into the bush, harvest their timber or bamboo, and they build their yards. Next one. And of the 76 farmers we visited, there's 76 different designs and size and all the rest. Next one. This is probably the most sort of generally conventional shed with a sort of walkway up the middle where you walk down with the feed trough on either side, and the cattle come in either side. Next one. Some have a bigger area. They might be in a palm plantation, and this one's just got a big fence around here, probably a couple of hectares, and a long feed trough. Next one. And this one's just another long feed trough with a roof over it, and next to a rice paddy and surrounded by palm plantation elsewhere. Next one. And some are still in the process of finishing it off, but basically there's every design you can think of, but they all more or less work. Next one. Keep going. All local materials. These blokes, they get their saw, they cut down the tree, they get a chainsaw, cut and cut the log into planks, use the sawdust, and just build the whole thing on the spot. And they've got 20 odd people, and they have working bees, so an awful lot gets done on a weekend. Next one. unlike other areas of Indonesia I've visited, there's not a lot of water in this area under the ground. In Java and Sumatra, you just dig a hole and the water comes out of the ground. Here there's plenty of water because we're dealing with a 2 to 3,000 millimetre rainfall, but you can't access it wherever you want. So this is the standard. This is a very, very common combination of gear, and these people just go to the nearby water supply. There's always a water supply somewhere, but it's usually just a bit far away, and they don't have piping systems, so people run their households this way. They run their small irrigation, you know, for vegetables and stuff, and they run their livestock with these sort of systems. Next one. And where some of these cows have gone, this is serious manual labour. These people have some spare time, so they have some spare land, they have some spare grass, and they have lots of, well, not lots of spare time, but enough spare time, and they're used to hard yakka, and they work hard. So just as someone says we need some water, so you get 2 20-litre drums and you go down the creek and you fill them up. Next one, and you come back and you fill the troughs. Whilst I've been to Indonesia for a long time, and I still hadn't, until these cows came and I got the reaction for the farmers, it hadn't sort of hit me. But the barley cows, which these guys are used to, I'm not sure if that's the best picture, but the barley cows are a beautiful little feminine, light-boned, sort of a little movie star. They're very pretty and exceptionally fertile. And then, next one. And then when these guys saw our cows, they thought they looked like the Soviet wrestling team. You know, they're big, they're sort of masculine, certainly far more masculine than those little dainty little things, so they're a bit horrified, to be honest. It sort of shocked me. But when you see them next to each other, it's pretty obvious that these are quite a surprise. But, you know, you just explain they're beef animals, and they know whilst the barley cow is very productive and very fertile, it has a calf about the size of a Jack Russell Terrier, and it grows very slow. So, you know, in terms of beef production, it's not much good, and they can see that these animals are. Next one. The barley calves, they're just like a deer, and so they leap through the air, and they're very dainty little things, and they grow about the same rate as a Jack Russell Terrier too. Next one. Another thing which was really interesting that I learned on this particular trip is we go and talk to the farmers and say, you know, how are you going to do the management, and sort of try to give them a bit of a heads up on what to expect. And they said, oh, we're just going to find the lead cow. So how are you going to handle these cows when they get here? Oh, well, we'll identify the lead cow and we'll go out and tie her up. So, I beg your pardon. So the structure, the social structure in barley cattle, which are they're Bos javanicus, so they're completely different species. You'll notice that this cow here has got a rope, and I think this one has too. Anyway, the social structure within barley cattle groupings is the dominant female. I'm used to that concept, and the big barley bull is bossed around mercilessly by the lead barley cow. So I understood the process straight away. So all they have to do is, and they all naturally know which are the lead cows in the group. They tie that cow to a tree with a long rope so she can graze around the tree, and all the other animals stay within 100 metres. So there's your fence. So they were very disappointed when I had to tell them that that's not how it's going to work with a Brahman cow. Next one. So there is plenty of grass there. The question that was constantly asked before the cattle got there, are they going to feed these animals enough? Do they understand? So short answer is they certainly can. Whether everyone gives them the exact amount that's required, we're working on that, but generally they're doing a mighty job. But it's a process. Literally, they go out in the afternoon with a motorbike and a bag and a little sickle, and they cut the grass. And they need 2 tonnes a day, and they get about 40 kilos. Each bloke takes him about 2 hours. So 20 motorbikes have got to come back in every night and dump that down, and then they feed half of it in the evening and then half it the next morning, and it starts all over again. So I reckon they're going to get sick of that after a while, and so we're pretty confident we'll get some of them to do grazing under the trees. Next one. Oh, this is on the notice board on one of their little sheds. There's you mightn't read it there, but it says it's a 500,000 rupiah fine if you don't cut your share of grass. So they're serious about it. Next. Some of them go out in teams and load up the ute. Next. And then they just chuck it next to the yard. Some of them might have a tarp over it, and then they feed it straight up in the evening, about half, and then half the next morning, and then start again. Next one. The government's providing a bit of concentrate to get the people started, and then after that's run out, well, they'll either decide to use their own or just basically operate on grass, which I suspect most of them will. Next. The other big asset to this project is they're surrounded by palm oil. It's just millions of hectares. So these yards, literally within that, totally surrounding the yard is palm trees. So they just cut a big frond off the palms, and a normal part of the palm tree management is to cut the bottom fronds as the tree grows up and new fronds come out the top. They cut the bottom ones off, and at the moment they chuck them on the ground as compost. So they take the fresh one off, and the government has bought them these choppers, and then the chopper, so the chopper busts it all up, and they feed that directly to the cows, and it's very palatable. I don't think they need to use the chopper, but they prefer to do that. You can just cut the leaves straight off the stem. So that's if you run out of grass, you're surrounded by 1 million hectares of this stuff, so they won't run out. Next one. And there's the chopper. The main I used to work at Tipperary, so one thing, all the things I hate is machinery is the main one. And so having a machine here means you've got to have fuel, you've got to repair it, you've got to sharpen these blades. I don't think it's necessary. But it's very quick to chop this up. Next one. So Tim had a win-win before. I reckon I've got more. This project has so many positives. You know, you almost think it's exaggerating, but believe me, it's not. So if we send some breeders over there, then Indonesia can grow a bit more of its own beef. But they'll never ever be able to catch up with just the animals they've lost over the last few years. So this is a small catch-up, but absolutely no threat to your business. In fact, it's a brand new business for you because it gives you a new market you didn't have before, and a very lucrative one too. So the Indonesians get to use, to grow cows you've got to have land. Indonesia doesn't have much more land, and they've got so many people on it, there's not scope for waste land, but they've got 10 million hectares they can all use again a second time round. So it's just this amazing opportunity. When you do this with smallholders, these poor rural people become a lot more, their wealth increases significantly. The value of a cow to a small Indonesian farmer is enormous. Yours is increasing, but it'll never get there. There's things like composting. These people own personally probably a couple of hectares. So when you've got a lot of cows doing a lot of poo, you get a lot of fertiliser for free. So you put the hard work in cutting the grass, but then you get all the poo and opportunities for compost, biogas. And also, you'll see in a minute why I think it's good for fire. So next one. So this bloke here, he's a small farmer. I took this photo only last week. He's just got the cows have arrived from the quarantine, and this was a pen about the size of this room, with just a timber fence, and each farmer had built his own little pen big enough for 2 cows, just scattered around there, a bit like the booths over there. We said, how are you going to get them in there? But anyway, we came back 2 days later and they just fed them, and once 2 walked in, they just shut the gate, and then the next bloke had to go. So this fella's got his 2 cows. He's, in this situation, he feeds his cows. So everyone does it slightly different. So he's responsible. He goes out and cuts the grass. He carries the water. He's got his concentrate there. And he's just won lotto. These cows are worth, they're just gold. He could never afford to buy these himself. So the government has just done him a wonderful favour, but the government gets a win out of it as well. And these aren't shonky crooks that are trying to steal the animals. These are fair income, hard-working farmers that are seriously trying to, just earn some more money and get their family ahead. Next one. Nearly finished. Those cows are worth probably 3 times what his house is worth. Next. Next. Most of this is in remote areas, so these people, it's a big earn for them to get a bit more money. Next one. Just to prove that it does work with Australian cows by some means, a couple of cows in the photos came from Sulawesi. Other exports went to Sulawesi a few years ago. They ended up across the sea in Balikpapan. So this cow's been here about 4 years, and she's pregnant again to a Simmental bull with AI. And next one. She's got a 500 kilogram calf, about a little over 2 years old, and he was to be sold, or he's already sold, for the Korban, which was in September, and the value of that bull was 1 year's salary. So it's a serious bit of income. So there's every incentive for these blokes to do the right thing. Next one. This is at the rubbish tip in Sabarinda. So the people doing the scavenging on the rubbish tip, they're allowed to have some small cattle yards in there, and they, as well as scavenging the green waste that comes into the rubbish, the rubbish tip's got a bit of area around it, and they plant and cut grass there too. But doing a mighty job on these cows. Next one. Really, you'd be flat out having such a result at your place, I'm telling you. Keep going. And there is passion for cows here. Some guys that's all they do is feed their cows. There is a lot of serious interest in growing cows. Next one. This little calf's only 100 days old, and that one's 45 days old. And this farmer lives next to a soybean processing factory. So these animals get fed up to the back teeth on nice grass and some soybean waste. And that barley cow, so he's in another 100 days, he'll be bigger than a mature barley cow. Next one. The cows are in here, the poop comes out here, and it gets fed into an entry point there, and the biogas is created there. So these small farmers get the opportunity. You need more than 2 cows to generate a bit of biogas. Next. So they get free gas in the house and free lights. Next. And there's a composting gadget which the government has also provided, so they get extra fertiliser for free. Bit of labour. Next. It sounds small, but the chooks, the flies lay eggs in the poop, the maggots grow, and the chooks eat the maggots, and you get an explosion of chooks. And these chooks are worth a lot of money. Each of those chooks there are worth about $5. So you get this massive explosion in your chook population, and mum's happy. She either gets free chooks or she can sell them down the market. And it's a very serious amount of dough for a little sort of household enterprise. Next. And all this income really means that there's no Medicare in Indonesia. So if you've got cash, you can get health care. If you don't, you can't. So income is very important for the real basics, education and health. Next one. Nearly finished. And in the dry season, there is a build-up of fuel and whatnot under these trees. And sometimes it's poisoned, and sometimes it's just left, and in the dry season it goes very dry. So it makes an ideal fire hazard. Next. And in the last few months it's been burning like crazy. Next. If you graze cows under these trees, you can't burn anything. There's only green grass left. Next. So that's before the cows get there, and the previous photo was after the cows have left. Next. The Northern Territory Government and MLA have been supporting this project, and the some NT staff there have been training the local people on how to use electric fencing. Next. Lots of seminars and technology transfer. Next. Next. Mainly about they know about cows, they just don't understand the half a dozen differences between Australian cows and their cows. So once you pointed them out, they're on the track. So that's all the good news. Here's the sort of difficult parts. It's a real problem that the Indonesian government financial cycle is the total opposite to what would be ideal for the Australian cattle and pregnancy production cycle. So when money is allocated, essentially you can't buy cows till the second half of the year, which is all wrong. You want to buy them the first half of the year because you want pregnant heifers. So somebody's got to do something to figure out a way to we can't change the cow cycle, sadly. So somebody, Andre in Indonesia, has to be innovative and change the funding cycle to allow cows to be bought at the most optimum time. For feeder cattle, the feedlots, the private sector, operate their own quarantine. But it's too hard to do that with breeders. So there needs to be some policy changing and some allocation of funds to create large, sophisticated public quarantine facilities for all these breeders that hopefully will be going in there. And there needs to be pre-delivery support for these farmers to bring them up to speed, and then after they get them, they need some help too. The other thing, brucellosis. Australia spent $1 billion on eradicating brucellosis, but they didn't spend the last bit to convince Indonesia that we actually did spend the billion and were successful. So the Australian government needs to start again and try very hard to convince the Indonesian government that we had got rid of brucellosis and they don't need to test these cows again when they get there. Next one, I think I'm nearly finished. So this is the best system in the world, bar none. Next. Yep. And never let a chance go by. Read my blog. Thank you.